6:41 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar addressed 40 members representing 17 unions yesterday, which included the NUGFW President James Lambert and PSA President Watson Duke. The Joint Trade Union movement, however, publicly rejected the Prime Minister's request, questioning her motives. Well, we're joined now by the leader of the Movement for Social Justice, a union, Labour-based political party, for his perspective on the matter. Good morning to you, David. Good to have you on the program. And could I ask you to respond to that question that I posed? And I know you heard it when you were coming in.
Yes.
It's not meant to be insulting. It's meant to be reflective of one of the views that some people hold, that people like yourself should really not be given all of this space or prominence because it's about who's going to form the government, and they don't see you or your organization forming the government. Therefore, there's pointless having you to say anything.
So we remain in the old structure and old box, PNM, UNC, UNC, PNM, and the country continues to degenerate and deteriorate. That's why we say we need a revolution in mind, to change the thinking of people like that, to say that, first of all views ought to contend, all ideas ought to be out there, different perspectives ought to be shared, but more importantly, to recognize that change can mean us thinking about MSJ being in government and not stuck with these two parties that have run the country into the ground from independence to now.
Yet they will say that for all the best intentions and the best will in the world of talking about a revolution of the mind, there are too many people set in their ways to really make a meaningful difference.
And you know, it's interesting because the polls say 26% of the population, well, about 34% of the population support neither the PNM nor the UNC. So there is a very large body of opinion out there. And I mean, I walk around, people come up to me, some people disagree. A lot of people, I was at a funeral yesterday, Richard Brathwaite,
yes,
a patriot. I miss Raoul Pantin, unfortunately, another patriot and so on. But you know, you go to activities and people come and they engage in discussion. People say they support, whether they're going to vote or not is not the only factor, but they support and like what MSJ is doing, what we stand for, what we represent.
And let's talk about this issue. Was it inappropriate of the Joint Trade Union movement to reject this offer from the Prime Minister? Is this pure politically motivated? Because surely it was an opportunity, even if it's an election season, to have some leverage at a time when the People's Partnership is trying to win an election and regain government.
Well, first of all, you know, it's interesting. They said, the news clip said 17, she met with 17 unions. That can't be true.
Why not?
Why not? Because let's list them. You know, they didn't list all of the unions that were present, and if they don't list all that was present, they're not going to get to 17.
May not be major unions.
Unless you get some in-house unions that are not true unions in the real sense of the word. So you had Seamen and Waterfront Workers, NUGFW, PSA, all Trinidad. Beyond that, I think prison officers was there. That's 5. You're not going to get more than that. So the majority of the major unions in the country did not go. And so it's an indication of the fact that really and truly the labor movement, and I said it before, that this government has no moral authority. I said it way before the meeting yesterday, so it's not something in response to what the union's position was, but that the government has no moral authority on this matter. I just want to go back. This was the express of the 10th of November. I had a media conference on the 9th of November as MSJ. And at that time, oil prices were just about just below $80 a barrel. And I said the government needs to come with a major statement, honest accounting to the country and to the citizens as to what is the situation, to indicate to them what are the implications of the decline in the price. 9th of November, we said that. Where are we now? 23rd of January. So more than 2 months have passed, and the government now is getting around to it. The Prime Minister and the government were doing absolutely nothing throughout November and December when the price of oil was slipping. The Minister of Energy said, don't worry, we are a gas economy, so oil prices declining doesn't have an impact on the country. That was nonsense, absolute nonsense. And we said so. And not only in terms of government budget, but also to the point of foreign exchange. So in the column it was very clear where we said that the issue will impact on foreign exchange earnings. And so what happened 2-3 days ago, the business community said to the government, Madam Prime Minister, deal with foreign exchange, and then she instructed Ministers Hawaii, Barrett to meet with
Joala Rambaran, the central bank governor.
I mean, oh my goodness. This country has no clear leadership. No leadership that has vision, that has an understanding of the issues. And so the meetings over the last few days were pure PR. And the whole country knows that. If you quietly speak to the business people and so on, they would say as much too, you know. They may not say that publicly, but they would say as much.
But in relation to the whole question of this decline in the oil price, earlier this week, the Prime Minister in Parliament referred to an actual saving based on the subsidy, not 1.4 billion, but almost 2 billion, including Unipet and some other numbers and so on. What is your response to that? Because there's so much concern about a loss of revenue based on the decline in the oil price. Now we're hearing about a $2 billion saving based on the gas subsidy.
Yes, I mean, when the price of oil comes down and therefore the international price of gasoline declines,
yes,
our selling price of gasoline then becomes less subsidized, because you're really subsidizing the difference between the actual selling price and the international market price. So that if the international market price is coming down, then the subsidy goes down.
Yes.
But the savings on the subsidy is not greater than the fall in revenue. So the fact of the matter is that the overall effect is of decline in revenue. And therefore, the government has to cut expenditure. Now, quite apart from that, commodity prices are falling, ammonia, methanol prices are falling, and therefore the selling price of natural gas from National Gas Company, NGC, to the downstream users in Point Lisas goes down, because NGC prices its gas to the ammonia, methanol, steel producers on the selling price of their products. So NGC is going to make less profit as well. So there are several areas of loss of revenue. Now, that is one part of the problem. In other words, the government can say, okay, we're going to borrow money, which is not necessarily good, but they could say we're going to borrow more money to cover the increased deficit. Remember, when the oil price was budgeted at $80 originally, and the gas price at $2.25 and so on, the government was still in a deficit position.
Yes.
So what is simply happening is the deficit has gotten larger, which means more borrowing.
In fact, Minister Ho, I was on this program last week, and I think he confirmed that the combination now is a deficit within the range of 12 billion as is being budgeted. But he also pointed out that whatever is budgeted doesn't always turn out to be that way, and in fact it's usually quite a lot less.
And they can cut, right? But this is the whole point of what we were saying 3 months ago. We said, say to the country, what is the situation and what are the implications of $70 barrel oil, $60, 50, 40. I think I looked in today's newspaper, it's 46 something.
In fact, I was reading, I think the CEO of BPTT Global,
Yes.
saying that the expectation is for low oil prices for the next 3 years.
Yes, I saw that interview. I think he's in Davos.
Yes.
So and different people are saying different things, but the fact of the matter is that we ought to now budget for lower oil prices. So it means cutting expenditure. But you see, Fazia, that is one aspect of the problem, which is government's budget. The other aspect of the problem is foreign exchange. So I read one report saying that in the last 12 months or so, the central bank sold over $600 million just to maintain the exchange rate where it is, you know.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're drawing down on our reserves at a rapid rate in order to meet our consumption of foreign exchange. Now, when you overconsume your foreign exchange, ultimately that leads you to the IMF. In other words, a government deficit...
Isn't that a scare tactic to automatically talk about us running to the IMF?
It's not a scare tactic. It's saying that is a possible scenario. It's not. It doesn't have to happen, but it is a possible scenario if we do nothing.
Or it may not happen, because
if we do nothing, or if the prices of oil and gas were to go up.
But that part of it is unlikely. But didn't the Prime Minister, in that address, which many people have said, didn't provide a lot of detail, presented data, the extent of foreign reserve, how many months of cover, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, indicators which suggest that, yes, there will be an impact, but it may not be as bad as people are thinking.
In the 1970s, you and I are old enough, a lot of the country is not old enough to remember, 1970s we had huge reserves. And we had major funds. There were development funds, a port development fund, electricity development fund. There was lots of money that was put into special funds. Coming out of the oil boom, in 4 or 5 years' time, all of our savings were depleted, all completely gone, and we were in the IMF. So it is not beyond the realm of possibility for us to end up there again. Now, we may have more in gross, in terms of dollar terms, savings than we had then in terms of foreign exchange earnings, but we are consuming our foreign exchange at a much more rapid rate. In the 1970s, early 80s, you didn't have the importation of motor vehicles like you have now. So I saw PDG. I don't know if you saw PDG.
Yes,
right.
And
just the other day was PDE.
I didn't know there was the bypass F.
I think they bypass F. But I don't know why, but they bypass F. But we moved from C to D to G in absolutely no time at all. So we're consuming huge amounts of foreign exchange. Going to malls, you see all of this stuff being imported and so on. So what is happening is that even while we have more reserves, our consumption is greater. Now, on top of that, we have a major loss of confidence in the economy. There's capital flight, so that people are exporting or holding US dollars because they're not certain. People are hedging against a possible devaluation. People are saying, well, maybe the US dollar to the TT dollar may move from where it is to something more. So therefore, if I have more US dollars, I could get more for it in TT later on and so on. There's a scarcity, so I'm going to hold on to some US dollars so that I could pay. I met a businessman just, when was it? Day before yesterday, ran into him. He said, listen, they're not going to, he put an order out to his company not to sell down the inventory, because if they sell down the inventory, they don't know if they're going to get foreign exchange to buy new stocks. So this is a reality out there.
And the reality is also,
this government is fiddling while Rome is burning.
Yet, David Abdulah, this is an election year. We have about 3 minutes left, and I'd just like to encapsulate your thoughts. It's an election year, and it is about winning an election.
At the expense of country.
Okay, but
at the expense of
which government we've had previously have not done that?
And this is why we say we need to get away from the governments that we've had in the past and have visionary, clear leadership that has the moral authority to say to different sections, not only business and labor and so on, but people who are outside of those sections.
Does a labor-oriented, maybe so-called socialist type political organization like the Joint Trade Union Movement, can it in any way, shape or form, build the confidence of the citizenry in an environment people look upon left-wing things based on how it's presented in a very negative sense? And
I come back to our policy document, which I gave you, which I'm not sure you haven't read yet, right? and to say we have begun to engage the business community. We have met with the Trinidad Chamber as MSJ. We've met with the Energy Chamber. The Couva Point Research Chamber has invited us to a meeting and so on. There are other chambers we're going to be meeting to discuss what our specific policies are. Because there's one thing to label and say, well, MSJ is left, radical and so on. But there's another thing to say, what are the specific policies that MSJ has and is offering for this country to take the country forward?
And who is to say that if, let's just say if, whether this next election or next election, the Joint Trade Union Movement were to form the government...
Well, the Joint Trade Union Movement would not form the government because the trade unions are not a political
Sorry,
party.
MSJ, my mistake.
Right,
sorry,
yes,
MSJ, let me make that clear. The MSJ were to form the government, wouldn't you be kowtowing to your financiers? Wouldn't you be kowtowing to big business, or wouldn't you be kowtowing to the unions?
We have no financiers, so that is not an issue.
You might get them to win the election.
Yes, but we have a very clear policy with respect to party finance and so on. So, no, we are not. We are about trying to deal with social justice and equity, about bringing about real change that is real, that is not PR, that is not spin, that is not false promises and false hope. Something that the ordinary people of this country could trust and say, yes, we need to change our lives for the better in Trinidad and Tobago.
And final question, David, isn't that a very tough sell to a citizenry who, yes, might be cussing both the PNM and the UNC and the People's Partnership and the ILP, but they shrug their shoulders and say, what else we going to do?
And if there's nothing else on the horizon that offers hope, then why not MSJ to offer hope?
David Abdulah, good to get your perspective. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. And indeed, there are so many issues in the mix as far as the politics, and we seem to have sort of cast in stone sort of mentality, and that's why I asked David that question, to deal with it first and foremost. As a good friend of mine said, why bring people like David Abdulah on when they have no stake in forming the government? It's because this is a free country, and there are many different ideas, different perspectives, and different ways of doing things beyond just the establishment position, whatever that establishment position is. We'll take a pause for the news, and then when we move into our second hour, we put the focus on sport on this Friday.